a lot of us get hired in UX, especially UX research, to at least we think to advocate for users, improve the
Yeah.
user experience of products, like make things that are actually useful and valuable and respectful to human beings. I mean, I think many of us have those rose-colored glasses on, and then we get into our jobs, and it's a very different
Yeah.
story where we may be blocked from doing those things and achieving those goals. And we have to, I don't know, I think there's a lot of personal turmoil that can come up for some of us.
Amy, hello.
Hello, Danny.
We meet. So, Amy, thank you for coming. Thank you for hearing the call. We haven't really met. I mean, we've just been chatting a little bit in our green room for the show, but we haven't actually met in person. But I've been tracking you a little bit on LinkedIn, and I've been really interested in some of the comments you've been making about what the hell is going on. And I just thought you'd be like a really interesting voice to bring to the conversation. It's just, yeah, I'm trying to bring different voices that bring different perspectives into this. So just for people that won't know you, so I was having a look. It looks like you started out in research, like a research intern, and then you moved into research, like user research at State Farm. Oh, that's interesting. And then you did some
Yeah, that's
freelance
an
work.
insurance company, in case you're not familiar with
Oh, okay. I
American
was thinking like a
corporations.
farm. That
I
sounds
know.
cool.
Yeah, it did start for farmers, that insurance company, and now it's just like a, major American insurance corporation. But yeah,
Uh,
right, like right out of grad school, a very interesting place to start my official research career in a very old traditional company, kind of some culture shock going on
Really
for sure.
interesting. Well, when it says State Farm, I thought it meant literally a farm. So,
I wish.
yeah, but I can imagine what you're saying. Yeah, when you come out and you go into like a big machine, a big, corporate entity, and it's like, how do I
Well,
navigate?
especially if you come up in a discipline like anthropology, which is very critical of things that are, business and political structures and systems and things that are harmful to human beings and the environment. Like it is that way. So that's, generally how I see the world anyway. But yeah, going from training my master's program into a big corporation, it was definitely an adjustment that I needed to make.
Yeah, I'd like to pick that out more with you. I just want to, just for people so they know a little bit more about you. So you then did freelance and agency UX research in Intel, Jaguar, Land Rover, and then you moved to research roles, and then researcher at eBay. Interesting.
Hmm.
I'll have to talk about that. And
Yeah.
then you did some more research at Civic Research, and you moved more into strategy at that point, some quite big brands. And then recently, fairly recently, 2020, um, you sort of moved into career strategy and coaching for UX people, which was one of the main things that I thought you would have such an interesting perspective on, because you're close to the front line. But let's just wheel it back to that point that you were just saying, because I partly think about people that might be listening to this who are at the start of their career. And you were just saying how, you know, what a strange feeling it was to kind of go into this big machine when you've got all this training, you've done all this like really like method, sort of quite methodology driven, I imagine, and then you go into some corporate space, and then you have to like translate it into that language. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I when I was working at State Farm, I entered onto the consumer research team, and then eventually it kind of blended with the user research team. So then I was further exposed to that type of work, which then I carried forward into many other jobs. Um, I had several coworkers who were like, "Why? What is anthropology, and what are you doing here?" And I have actually used that question as part of my, like, publishing, writing, conference work since then, because it's a recurring theme of asking, like, what are we even doing in these companies? Whether that's, like, what are we trying to do here? What are we doing as researchers? What are we doing as anthropologists? And yeah, especially over the past 10 years, 10 plus years, a lot of things have stayed the same and a lot of things have changed. But I did have a coworker who drew me a little business card once, and it had said, like, Amy Santee, anthropologist and ethnographer, and it had a dinosaur drawn on it because a lot of people also conflate anthropology with one of the subdisciplines of anthropology, which is archaeology. But archaeology is also not dinosaurs; that's paleontology. So yeah, we have had to do a lot of explaining. Kinda like coming into these cultures, but also learning and adjusting and adapting to figure out what we are doing there.
I that's interesting because something really chimed for me when you're saying like, what are we actually doing here? And I think if I'm really honest, I feel that generally speaking, I have turned down some gigs that I thought just no, I'm not going to work for that sector or that thing. But I think generally, and maybe this is the case for all designers, you kind of like I sort of shut down the outside world and the greater kind of impacts. And I kind of just get into my team, my immediate stakeholders. We're working on this sprint. I've got to make this part of the journey function. And I'm sort of like slightly like, I'm not going macro and I'm just staying like right in the product or the thing. And I kind of like, it's almost like I can't hold it all. And so I just sort of zero in on the thing that I'm building and getting very granular in detail, which is what we're trained to do. But I hear that what you're saying, I think is kind of like, hey, wake up. What are you actually doing to the world? Is that kind of where you're going with that?
I mean, like, yeah, what am I doing in my day to day? Like, why am I even in this job? A lot of us get hired in UX, especially UX research, to at least we think, to advocate for users, improve the
Yeah.
user experience of products, like make things that are actually useful and valuable and respectful to human beings. And I think many of us have those rose colored glasses on, and then we get into our jobs, and it's a very different
Yeah.
story where we may be blocked from doing those things and achieving those goals, and we have to, I don't know, I think there's a lot of personal turmoil that can come up for some of us. I really like what you said. I always say I wish I could give myself that advice. Amy from eBay, Amy at State Farm, Amy from several years ago, where I did care about too much and tried to solve too many challenges internally or with the products that I was working on. And I wish I had a better sense of narrowing my scope. Just like try to work on these things, have a good time with your team. Don't put or don't even like waste energy and effort on things that you won't be able to do anything about, more along the lines of organizational culture challenges,
Yeah. Oh,
the
really?
experience of employees, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I, I struggle like, so I came to this conclusion, in my work that the only way I can do a good job is if I can create the right conditions to do a good job. That was something that I felt quite strongly about. And I was like, well, I can't design this thing if we're working without research. I can't design this thing if, everything's subjective and, I've got like the wrong tools or everybody's buried in meetings. And so I've been thinking about this, like, I think you get like there's consultants like McKinsey and stuff, and they get like an invitation to change the place, to sort of nobody move, everybody drop your mouses. We're going to go off for 3-4 days for an offsite. We're going to change how we're working. And I feel like the alternative to that is sort of like the Trojan horse change agent, which is where like you go in just as a researcher, but then you start like tinkering with the culture, tinkering with the ways of working. And I can't help myself. I don't know
Can't
about you. I
either.
can't help it.
I can't well, I like, fundamentally as a human and the way I see the world, I can't help it. But in hindsight, reflecting on these experiences and even in this conversation right now, I actually do think we have to acknowledge the constraints of our conditions, as you said, right? It is hard for us to change our working conditions from many angles.
Yeah.
Can we get the tools we need? Can we do research for this or that design decision? And I think it's a question of I would like to do it this way, ideally, versus here's what's available to me. Here's
Being
what's
pragmatic.
yeah, exactly. What's politically or culturally available or possible within the organization, to the point of like starting to like bug other people and disrupt their agendas, right?
When you talk about your learning and sense of how it's better to go, has that been hard won? Have you had failures in order to understand that and to calibrate your approach? Like, did you try it like too hard and then it didn't work, or you took too much on, or like how did you come to that understanding?
I have a pattern, a history of getting really jaded really quickly in my new jobs. Sometimes
Yeah.
it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes 3 months. And it sounds it sounds ridiculous and funny, but I think it's a matter of that perspective of like allowing myself to become jaded in a way, but also I care about and see things and want things to be different naturally so that I feel more easily affected by s- uh again like sort of organizational culture practices, uh, calling out maybe unethical or deceptive design practices and then being told like you're disrupting the team and
Yeah. Yeah.
like making them feel bad about their work and
Yeah.
all of that stuff,
Yeah.
and it's like so so I think I could go back and point out many examples of things that were not my responsibility to fix or that I didn't have the energy. And so getting jaded also for me is the precursor to getting burned out, or those things start to happen concurrently where you get burned out just trying to do your project work on tight timelines, but also like, hey, there's things that could be better about what we're shipping and how we do our work and all of that stuff. So yeah, I have tons of examples, but I think about this for myself in hindsight, but it's something that comes up a lot with my clients who are trying to figure out similar situations and like reframing and going like, what is really worth my time and energy in my short life? And like, what do I want to really spend that energy on, and
Yeah.
what can I do? And are there other places outside of my job where it makes more sense to put energy into making change?
You know, when you say that, it's like I have this feeling sometimes, and it's hard to say this without like I don't want to sound arrogant with this, but when if you've ever had moments in your role where you feel like you're you're doing a flash of something special, like you have articulated something really well and you figured out a problem and the stakeholders love it and you've achieved something in that system that you're in, like part of me feels like really, proud, and there's probably a bit of ego, and then there is a part of me that thinks like, am I really putting that skill to good use? Like
Like design skills, research
yeah,
skills,
like I've just
or
applied this energy, this life force, this energy, this thought, this creativity, this
mhm.
like yeah, handling the pressure. And what I've achieved is like getting a stakeholder to buy into a new way of running a checkout, And it's like I climbed a mountain, and yet like in the product design world, I achieved a lot. But when you look outside that world, like I've just helped influence conversion for
Right. We're
stakeholder
not born into this
share.
world as little babies thinking like my dream job is to like help make the insurance purchase process easier for people. Like we don't wake up and like that is not our goals. But we have to pay our bills. And
Yeah.
so I think like the more we can use Skills and brains to solve those problems and have our job and pay our bills. But I think what's important is like seeing the job as a job and not and trying to separate out our personal identities
Oh,
and our
yeah.
sense of self accomplishment, right? Like for you, it's a big accomplishment to do this podcast and all of the like technical setup and logistics involved, learning that and having these great conversations, and this has nothing to do with your job.
No, no, no. Well, yeah, no, it doesn't. I
I
mean,
mean, ish, but no, it's for you, it's for the community.
yeah, that was why I was doing it. But sometimes I find the things that have the biggest impact aren't the things that were hardest to do.
Mm,
You know?
mhm.
I've had like really good successes that just came from like an email or something, and then I've had other things that were like blood, sweat, and tears, and like barely moved the needle.
Totally, totally, yeah, and, there's a lot of emotional labor and invisible labor that goes into our day-to-day, trying to just, do our projects and, get done the things that we need to get done. There's a lot there, and for UXers, it's not just the technical skills and working on design and research and content is like all of these other things, relationships and process and logistics and things like that are big mountains to yes to climb up.
Which, when you think about that, it's no wonder that you get your identity entwined, and something that I noticed that, you've done a lot of commentary on. It's like the market is dire. And it's kind of like if your identity is wrapped up in a space that is uncertain, unpredictable, and rapidly changing, that's that's a hard that's a hard gig you've got there. You
Yeah.
know, if your whole sense of self-worth, and I felt it earlier this year when, because I've moved out of London, and I live in a small town, so I have to do remote work most of the time. And I went, I was applying for jobs, all these like product design jobs and stuff. Nothing, didn't get a call back, nothing. I'd never had that in my life. And
Hmm.
I was just saying to my partner, I was just like, I might have to leave UX, like I can't get work, and it like there was a sense of like, I was feeling almost like embarrassed from all the people that know me over the years, that they would see that I had like left the UX thing, and I'd feel like there's something like embarrassing about that, like all these things came in, which is like totally like no one's thinking that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
felt it, because of that identity, basically.
I have felt it too. I have felt it too. And I mean, okay, I did just take a UX research contract job. We were talking about that a few minutes ago, but I would say like that's very new for me and I haven't done it in several years. So up until last month, I was no longer practicing UX, but I was still, as a coach for UX practitioners, still very much involved in the field and keeping tabs on it and trying to figure it out and move through the chaos like everyone else, and not just the chaos of the job market. That's one thing, but the chaos of the field and how rapidly everything is changing and all the uncertainty. And so, yes, working, in the first couple years of coaching, and I do work with a lot of job seekers, lots of success there. It was very easy for people to get jobs, multiple offers, a bunch of money, be more selective. Like, this is the company I want to work at. This is the kind of work that I want to do. To have higher expectations for their jobs and the work environment. And around the end of 2022, as you know, things really started shifting with all the layoffs, the shrinking of teams, hiring freezes, just like lack of budgets, like all kinds of things. And now I mostly work with people who are just having a challenge going through the job search process that is nothing like what they were used to. And many people who and I don't blame them. It's very natural in our capitalist society, especially for information workers, knowledge workers. If I keep trying and I can't get a job, I can't get interviews, or I go through the process and I'm still not getting offers, like I must be doing something wrong. The longer you are out of a job, the more shameful it can feel for a lot of people. The more people start to question, do I have a place in UX anymore? How do I make myself competitive? Like, what do I do to even get seen by a recruiter or hiring manager? And folks a lot of the time will internalize this stuff. And I typically see it with people who do have a very strong identity with their UX work, but also before we get into UX, maybe you have like advanced degrees in a certain discipline, and those were big accomplishments for you. And maybe again you consider yourself to be more of a knowledge or information worker, and this is how you manifest that stuff in your day to day, right? So when that goes away, when it becomes less possible or impossible for a significant amount of time, then yeah, that is a huge, it's kind of like grieving the loss of identity, and it's not just your identity as a UXer, but maybe your socioeconomic identity as
Yeah,
well, and what
yeah,
your pay helps you to afford in life with your hobbies and how you spend your free time. And the last thing I'll say with that is I have and I mentioned this, but to bring it back, I have felt that too, because when my client base is UX professionals, when they don't have any money, then they can't like buy coaching services. And so for a couple of years now, I've seen a decline over time of simply because, people are much more risk averse. They may not have a job tomorrow. Maybe they haven't had a job in a while and they want to hold on to their cash. It is that straightforward. And
yeah, yeah.
so then I've been asking, gosh, like, what's my role in UX now? Like,
Right.
people, and I have to watch out for that inner critic saying, Amy, no one wants your services anymore. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what you're doing. And, like, this is your fault somehow. And people like all that inner voice, inner critic kind of stuff that I have also dealt with and needed to really try to keep in check, but have struggled to keep in check more recently.
Do you find that inner voice is so fickle, how you can feel all that and then you get some work and then suddenly it's like, because my partner will go, "Are you still worried?" I go, "No, it's all fine now." She goes, "But you were like freaking out." I'm like, "Yeah, but I've got a gig, it's fine. Like, it's all going to be okay." And then, like I don't get work for, a month or something and I'm like freaking out again. And I'm just like, man, this is hard work. This is tiring, and
It
I,
is.
I feel like, you and I were like, we're not at the start of this. Like, I kind of feel like in some respects that makes it easier because obviously we've got a CV and kind of been around the block a bit. But in another way, it makes it harder because, as you say, like your identity is so intertwined. Something that I was thinking about with this is like, when yeah, I'm probably a little older than you, so, but even so, like when we started careers, you kind of think like, what do I want to be? And it's like, oh, I'm a designer. And it's like, that means in your head, like, I'm going to be a designer, like probably for the rest of my life, or certainly for the next 20 years or whatever. And like now it's all kind of upending, not just in our sector, but, everywhere. And there was something that you said, which I really caught my eye. You said, a feature, not a bug, how the tech job market is rigged against workers. And you also said 9 out of 10 UX practitioners are considered leaving the field. Many of us are asking ourselves, what the hell am I doing anymore? What's the point of this? Why doesn't anyone care about UX? I mean, particularly a feature, not a bug, how the tech market is rigged against workers. I really love to hear more about that. I
Yeah.
mean, you've written a very good post about it, but perhaps for people that haven't read your blog post, you could tell us a bit more.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I've touched on this in a lot of my writing on my blog and on LinkedIn, and then in the podcast episode over on What is Wrong with Hiring, which is where I was exploring that question with Lauren Friedman. I mean, it's not just that the job market and the economy is rigged against tech workers in this new era of precarity and job instability, and lowering compensation. It's any and all workers. That's just the
Yeah.
system. That's the way I see things, and that's
We're
the
not that special.
yeah. We're not, and actually, yeah, exactly. And I think this new instability has made us realize in a very challenging and uncomfortable sort of way. And I say us as like a group of workers, tech workers, UXers, is like, oh shit, like our stuff can get taken away just as easily. Our wages can go down. Our healthcare can become expensive. My economic standing is not as stable as I thought it was over the past 10 years, 20 years, right? And we've had different booms and busts, but this is not your typical cyclical boom and bust of an economy like the dot-com bubble or
Yeah.
um, not that the 2008 global recession was a normal thing either. That was the fault of essentially people in finance
Yeah.
making decisions that other people had to pay the
Gambling.
consequences for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Totally.
see it kind of more like that, where the people who control the levers of the economy, the people who control whether or not you and I have a job and therefore income and therefore, at least in the US, good healthcare, right? Like groceries, that stuff is mostly not within our control at a structural level. And so when I say that it is rigged, it's because other people are making decisions about our livelihoods and the quality of our well being and our day to day and our families and all of that. And until we have a shift in how we show up in the workplace as workers and look at ways to exercise the fundamental power we have as humans coming together to advocate for ourselves, it's going to remain that way. And so what I mean by that is organizing and workers unions and creating ways for us to push back or demand the things that we want, which is work. Work. We want work. We want stability. We want healthcare that's not expensive. We want fair pay. We want to be able to say no to working on products that we consider to be unethical, right? Like we should and could have those things. We just haven't really done much in that realm at this point.
I I think we have, like, a lot of. I kind of think of, like, it feels like a very, like, white collar problem, you
Mm,
know, like
what
it's
do you
sort
mean?
of like, well, in the sense that, like, I think of how when I started UX, like, we were being brought in to build websites which would basically make people shop online and not go into shops so that they could save money. But that means that people who are working in the shops might not be having as many jobs, or that means that maybe call centers are going to get trimmed back because if the website's better, they're not calling up. And so there was this kind of, like, I always had this, like, kind of weird feeling of, like, and I'd be talking to the call centers and stuff and saying, oh, so how do you do that? And how do you do that? And I'd be kind of like working out how to make the website more efficient so that they wouldn't call the call center. But ultimately, like, what that's going to mean is like less people are needed in the call center. And I think there's something about, you said, like, I was just thinking, like, this uncertainty in the market has come for other sectors, has come for other classes before, but I feel like particularly at the moment, it's a real middle class, you know, like, war zone, because they've said with AI, the last job to go is going to be a plumber, and people working in construction and stuff like that, like, they're not going to be as impacted by this, like, redundancy. Whereas people who, have been insulated from, in a degree of privilege, really, have been insulated by taking, especially in design and UX, taking high day rates and stuff like this. And suddenly the day rates start coming down. And suddenly, you can see the way that the market's looking at it and going, oh, well, synthetic users, right? So we could just, like, create an AI bot to do user research. And suddenly you're an overhead. You're not an opportunity anymore. And
Right.
it's like the kind of the guns have turned on us, like,
It's yeah, I think especially
that
if you
makes sense.
make it yeah, if you make like a relatively good amount of money, and I would say even if you make like look, $100,000 in the US is not what it used to be, right? It still sounds like a lot. It's six figures, but it's really like kind of the minimum to live like a decent life in an expensive day and age. But even if you make like 300,000 pounds, if someone is profiting off of your labor, you're still an exploited worker. I think that's the first
Yeah.
thing to know. And that is what we have in
Expendable.
common. What's that?
Expendable.
Yeah, yeah. And like you just because you make that much money, it doesn't mean you're insulated. But and now we have plenty of proof of that. I think we have to recognize that this is what every worker has in common across any income level. And if we look in history, whether it's in the US or in England and the UK, and all across the globe, it's primarily been poor people who have fought the hardest for their rights as workers and as humans,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so like there's plenty of history with that, but a lot of that has been lost in the past several decades. A lot of the, I mean, especially recently in the US, and of course in the UK, there are some challenges too with politics and economics. But my point being that these rights have been fought for and won, and then some have been taken away. And we kind of need to acknowledge, like, if we want better working conditions, if we want better lives, then we have to uh, individually, there's very little we can do to change the system. Going back to our chat from 20 minutes ago, right? Collectively, we can do something about this. It's just becoming riskier. It's a scarier time. It seems again risky to try and band together with coworkers when even though it's illegal to get fired for organizing and unionizing, people still do get fired. And then again, in the US, you don't have health care. You can't go to your specialist because it costs too much. Like, if those things are tied into your employment, then yeah, you're going to be less inclined to take those risks for the greater good. But that is literally the only solution to these problems.
yeah. Unions. Yeah, that's interesting. I can remember my first job, second job actually. They were like, "Oh, do you want to join the union?" I was like 20, 24, 25. I was like, "What?" Like they're like, "Oh, we're going to fight for your rights." And I remember thinking, like, "What? I don't, like I didn't really understand." And then, you know, it gets to Friday, and they're like, because it was Eurostar, it's a French company. And the unions are strong in France. And it was like, I guess to Friday, everyone goes at like 1 o'clock. I was like, where are you going? It's like a 35-hour week. What? Yeah, great. That was Union One, and I just like benefited from it. I had no idea, I was like young and foolish, but like I can definitely see how there have been like things that have been won that are now eroding, and there's no energy to like regenerate that. Or maybe it's going to come, but yeah, I can see that. Definitely. So, is that yours? Because we paint quite a bleak picture here, um, and maybe that's okay. Like I don't always want to skirt away from the discomfort. And I'm hearing, certainly you being on the front line, it sounds like you're speaking to people that presumably are having quite a hard time with this. Like, what? I, I mean, how high are the emotions of the people you're talking to? Is it quite what is the temperature like at the moment, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's bleak. It really is bleak. In tech, in UX, in society, in our communities, like there's a lot of really these are dark times that we're living through. And it is important to acknowledge that. But at the same time, there's been plenty of dark times and bleakness in the history of humans, in the history of the United States, in the history of the UK, Europe, like really anywhere, right? And um, Martin Luther King said, and I don't know the exact quote, but that the moral arc of history is on like an upward trajectory. So even though it feels like, wow, we're really sliding backwards
If
on
you zoom out.
human rights, workers' rights. Yeah, if you zoom out, it's like, hard to see in your lifetime, maybe, but like ultimately things are on a positive trend. And I do believe that is true. It's just really hard to, yes, zoom out and get that bigger picture view when you're going through things every day. But a lot of creativity comes out of constraints. That's a truism in design, right? Like, what are your constraints? How do you work with those? How do you do creative problem solving with whatever it is that you're working on or trying to build? And I think that we are in a time where we're going to have to get super creative. We're going to have better communities, closer communities, whether that's online within our profession or locally. So I expect to see positive things come out of that, or adjustments to our expectations and how we use our resources, our limited resources in achieving the things that we want to, because institutions are largely broken.
Interesting. And in terms of like thinking more about, what can people do? Like you talked certainly about like union and like collectivization, like working together. Are there things that you can think of that perhaps some of the people that you've helped has worked for them? I'm just thinking for people who might be looking for answers and stuff, like, are there solutions where you're like, oh yeah, this is like, there was one thing that you said, I think you said something like the weird of your career. Did I read that right?
Yeah, like embrace the weird of your career. It's sort of like a tagline that I've had on
Is
my
that and is
website.
that is that a sort of like is that is that a place a mine that people can dig in order to kind of find some creative differentiation, a way to talk about themselves, about their uniqueness? Is that where that comes from?
It's looking back and going, who among us these days has had a straightforward linear career? And that's becoming less and less common. We come from all of these really interesting backgrounds. We have really unique skill sets that we bring to the table. We are creative problem solvers. We want what's best for the greater good. So, yes, I think it is looking at, and also looking at, reframing and acknowledging that what we thought, the way we thought our lives would go 10 years ago, that's not what has happened for a lot of people. The way we want things to go, is it's really hard to know. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of factors at play. And so I think, yeah, just looking at it from that alternative lens, you can call it weird, you can call it non-traditional, whatever you want to call it, unconventional. And I think that's just like my own personal vibe and life philosophy, is living unconventionally. And so I think we're just going to have to get more unconventional. I see people who are, yes, thinking of ways to frame their story more effectively or differently when they're looking for jobs. People who are deciding to leave UX and go into maybe something adjacent or something completely different. Depends on how they feel about the discipline of UX and the state of things. So um,
Have you
adjusting, and yeah, go ahead.
have you got a game plan? Have you got like what's your have you got a strategy?
My game plan is take it day by day, pay
Yeah.
my bills. And it has taken me several months going through periods, like some really challenging periods emotionally, around this business I built, of my coaching practice, kind of like just getting crushed with everything that has happened economically. And that is a really hard thing to accept. But yeah, I think part of it's acceptance of like what the reality is, and unteasing and untangling my self-identity with these structural issues. So I think that's a really helpful way for people to look at it and be nicer to themselves, and start to separate themselves from these macro trends and factors that are affecting them.
That I'm definitely hearing like a very good and solid, like, emotional framing of how to kind of handle the complexity and the emotions. Is there a practical strategy that you have as well? Like, that's more, I'm going to apply for these types of roles and, do that. Do you have that kind of thing in your head, or are you still figuring it out?
It's like I need to like coach myself in the way that I
Yeah.
coach other people. There's a process, it's not like a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
But there's a process and practices that you can implement. And I think the big thing is self insight, self research, really reflecting on your life, your experiences, your core values, what it is you care about, and setting that foundation, and then using that to assess your potential futures, the paths that you have forward. So it could be job types or companies, whatever it might be.
We never had to do this.
No,
I never did
no.
anything like this. Like, I just applied to jobs. Or I would just phone a recruiter up, and
Yeah.
then they would just say, do you want to work here? Do you want to work here?
Right. Do you have these
Like we
10
talk about
skills?
it as if I got the job, like
Yeah.
because it was just so like open door, and you go for one or two interviews and you get one and all this. And like, I think there's this whole thing of like the hustle it feels like uncomfortable, but yeah, I've felt like I've got to lean into it now, which is partly why I'm doing this podcast. There's a few reasons why I'm doing it, but partly it's, to sort of help, help people get to know me, which is just part of it. But it's like, you have to do this hustle. You have to think about almost you not as a sort of employee, but you as a brand, and it's something that I find a bit uncomfortable, so I'm trying to find my way of
Yeah.
doing it.
Done a lot of like personal growth work, lots of therapy, lots of reflecting, and just, wanting to feel good about my life decisions in general for many years now. And I think I bring in a lot of that stuff where it's like, you can be asking these trying to make big decisions, important decisions, mitigate risk, answering big important questions for your life for anything related to your life, whether it's your family life or how you're using your energy and free time. It could be with your job, it can be like with anything. And so I think these are practices, and kind of like treating these questions as a research and design project, while also not forgetting to pay attention to our intuition and our life experiences, and bringing all that together to get some clarity and narrow our scope and hone in on what it is we want to do, and explore the options just enough to make a decision that we feel good about. So I think like I draw from a lot of stuff. I draw from UX, I draw from anthropology, I draw from all kinds of other disciplines, in how I help people work through these questions. And again, I'm still trying to use these tools and methods myself, and it's not so easy sometimes. You can't just be like, "Or I'm going to do these 5 steps and then I'll figure it out." There's a lot of moving parts. We all have different priorities too. Is your priority to pay the bill? Is your priority to do work that is like super fulfilling? And those things can change too.
Something I saw you say is about redefining value beyond productivity and giving ourselves permission to find worth beyond outputs and algorithms and proving value and sort of what a healthier relationship would look like. And I think you said life is damn short and most of that stuff doesn't really matter. You have innate value as a human beyond your career, what you produce and what you do for others. Is that
Yeah.
does that sound like I think I got that from one of your
Sounds like something I would say.
yeah,
Luckily, there's other people who feel that way too. But yeah, like to pay my bills, I've had to take a step back and go, like, what can I just do for money? So I've taken on some UX consulting projects. I've done like odd jobs and side gigs on like stuff that I used to do in college for $20 an hour. I
like
try
what?
to make personal organizing is something I've been doing a bit.
Really?
Yep, helping. I especially love working with older people who have like tons of stuff in their houses and want to just like kind
So
of
this is you
downsize.
diversifying. This is your
Yeah.
strategy. When I was asking you for
Yeah.
practical
Yeah.
strategy, like this is part of it. You're actually like broadening beyond the field and you're just applying whatever the needs
I
are.
really just want to make money right now. I have done for a couple decades now a lot of selling on eBay, and I do that, regardless of my employment, but I've shifted into going, okay, how can I do a bit more of that just like as a side income stream? And you're right. I am not into hustle culture. I don't like any of that as it's broadly discussed in society and online, but there's kind of like some hustle to that, or creative problem solving. And so yeah, to answer your question or your statement, it is part of my strategy. And to go back to your point about identity and work, to make a shift like that where the way I pay my bills is not using my anthropology degree, it's not user
Yeah,
research, it's not coaching,
yeah.
it's just like, let me do this thing for $50 an hour. That is not something I thought I would need to do when I was in grad school.
I'd
Like I
find that
didn't
really
predict
hard.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
find that like I think if I
Yeah.
did volunteer work and that felt fine. but I think if I was being paid for it and then being paid like, what I would see as a lot less than what I would get working UX, like I'd find that deeply uncomfortable.
It is
And
uncomfortable
yeah,
because you don't know what's next either. Like, how long will I have to continue doing this? But I personally am recognizing that I'm becoming more comfortable with um, what I'm doing to pay my bills and to just like, yeah, be a person, like be a good person with the people who are in my life. Like that is something I can continue to focus on.
has that brought you anything unexpected, like working, for lower wage, but doing maybe like, more sort of human work in some cases, like helping old people with their sort things out and stuff. Like, has that brought anything unexpected, do you think?
um, it's I one thing I like about it, and it's kind of entrepreneurial in a way, is the variety of the work. I can plug things in when I have time for this or that. Um, a lot of the ways I spend my time, I'm a bird watcher. I'm again, I sell stuff on eBay and I specialize in certain things like collectibles and vintage. Both of those, bird watching and reselling, are really driven by curiosity and learning. Like I'm constantly learning and enjoying both of those activities. One is to pay my bills, one is purely for enjoyment, and being outdoors, right? So it has been nice actually to focus on things that are very different than computer work and user experience,
Yeah, yeah,
but fulfill that same need I have of curiosity and like endless learning about
yeah.
interesting topics.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, hopefully this is, food for thought for people who might be struggling in the sector and maybe feeling uncomfortable about doing something else, and you're doing it, and you're still keeping your foot in the scene, but you're also diversifying and trying some of the things and experiencing different things out of it as
Yeah.
well. So perhaps that will be helpful for people. So,
It
and that's
doesn't mean you're bad at your discipline anymore. It doesn't mean you don't belong in your field anymore. It doesn't
you
actually mean the things that
you're
society
worthless.
tells us. Yeah, it doesn't mean like you have no like worth to the economy anymore. So like you might as well just like it doesn't actually mean that. That's the stories we're told and the stories we grew up with, and the narrative, you know, more broadly speaking. But that's the adjustment that I think can be really helpful to make, is like, what do I actually care about?
I think that's a really good point to end on. I think that's, yeah, I feel like that's a really good underscore of the conversation. Yeah, I really appreciate that, and it's going to give me something to think about in this uncertain time, because yeah, like nobody's safe, and we're all figuring this out, and I think taking that philosophy that you're talking about could be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I have felt a lot of shame around this, and I have this, like, desire or fantasy, like, every day I wanna, like, share this with people. I want other people to know that, there lots of folks are going through the same thing, but it is hard when you feel so much shame about, such a drastic change that is really hard to resolve, but you gotta, like, work through that stuff and see things from these other angles and start to separate yourself out, and I do think I am in kind of a new phase now with that myself, where I'm adjusting, and doesn't mean I like what's happening, but I'm kind of accepting it and just adapting to things,
Do you
as
think
much as I can.
you think of the grief wheel? Like
Yeah.
you're in acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, grief isn't linear. So sometimes you go back to the anger part and
Yeah,
sometimes you go back to the disbelief. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much, Danny.
sharing conversation with me, and thanks for being really honest and open about how you're navigating this, and yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
hope it's helped.
Appreciate you inviting me onto your show.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Amy.